I am Pete George, and we are live on Game Changers with Vicki Abelson. Our guest tonight is Terence Blanchard.
And this was piss poor planning because I didn't ask Terence in advance to play, so we're not getting the trumpet tonight. But we'll get some good conversation and we'll deal with that. Terence, thank you so much for doing this.
Me, Vicki.
You are like crazy busy man.
Mm-hmm.
We had this planned a couple weeks ago, and you were in a session. You couldn't get out because you're doing a new movie, which. We were not at liberty to talk about right now, but you've got one that just came out that Pete and I went to see a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And Harriet, for those of you who don't know about Harriet Tubman, and I don't know if you know this, but Allie Willis is a good friend of mine, and Allie is the one who discovered Cynthia Erivo, actually.
Oh, no kidding.
Because when they were doing The Color, Allie wrote the music for The Color Purple.
Okay.
And I went and sat in Allie's seats to watch that on Broadway, and Cynthia got 3 standing ovations in one song.
Oh, yeah.
In one song.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen that.
Oh, yeah.
I've been to a lot of. I've never seen that.
Well, Deborah Martin Chase, the producer of the film, said that when she went to see her in The Color Purple, she had chills.
She was unbelievable,
Yeah.
and but the fact that in one song people are going to get to their feet 3 different times.
Oh, yeah.
So, what a force to have at the, and what a great time for Harriet to come out.
It's perfect.
Right?
Perfect.
Empowering women. I mean,
Yes.
what an unbelievable. That story is incredible about Harriet Tubman.
It was a true honor to work on it. You know, and I was just overwhelmed when Casey asked me to do it.
Did you know a lot about Harriet Tubman before?
Yeah, I did.
You did.
I did. But the thing that I think it's so amazing about it, like you're saying, it's the perfect timing for it because we have so many things going on in our country with the Me Too movement, and then everything that's happening that happened today in our country, and to sit down and I saw a meme. It was like my favorite flavor of ice cream is peach mint.
Somebody ran a thread today that said, "I love the smell of impeachment in the morning."
But the thing that I love about this film is the timing of it, because not only it's not, you know, it was interesting because people tried to label us like a slave movie. It's not a slave movie in the least. It's a superhero movie. It's a movie about a woman who was like an amazing heroine. It's
an emancipation. It's shocking. I mean, I knew that Harriet Tubman had done some of. I had no idea. I had no idea that she went in there alone, and kept going back in there and kept bringing more people and kept doing it alone.
But what was the initial reason why she went? For love.
Yeah, love wins, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the thing about it is like
I'm coming to bring us up on here so you can see
the strength of it. You know, that's the thing about it. It's not. I mean, you know, she
abandoned love to do the right thing. I mean, to
do
the right thing was more important than her personal love story.
But you know what I always say about that? It's the same thing that happens when you fly. When you fly, what do they tell you? If the mask falls, put the mask on yourself first. Save yourself first so you can save others.
And boy, did she save others.
Oh, no, it was
how accurate was all of that?
I think a lot of it was pretty accurate. You know, people will always nitpick little things, but you know, you only have a finite amount of time.
Right, and it's also dramatic. Stories. You've got to tell a story, and it's got to be. So, I'm very curious. We're gonna talk about. Well, maybe we need to go back to do that. I want to go through your story and how you did it, but when you're sitting down with important material like that, as the BlacKkKlansman is. Do you feel like this sense of responsibility? Like, I mean, I can't even imagine the weight that's on your shoulders to score that.
It is, but you know, I had this experience when we did Malcolm X. I was scared to death.
That movie!
And it was a very important movie for a lot of folks, for everybody. And Wynton Thomas, who also worked on Spike's latest movie, he was the set designer back then. And man, he calmed me down and he said, listen, we all want to do 150% for this film. He said, but the best thing that we can do is just to do our jobs. And when he said that, you know, it took all of the pressure off. So I wasn't sitting there trying to write the greatest piece of music for this thing. What I was trying to do was to write the appropriate piece of music. So with Harriet, I took the same approach. I tried to let, especially Cynthia's performance, guide me. you know, and I use that as an emotional fuel to tell me where the music should go. There was a couple of scenes that I watched when I first started working on it. One was the Walk to Freedom. I got very emotional just watching that every time I saw it. And then the other one was when she crossed the river. Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
At what point, I know a few composers for different mediums, TV, film. At what point are you coming in and starting to do your thing?
Well, it depends. It changed from director to director. I mean, you know, with some guys that I work with, you know,
like with Spike.
Spike, before he starts to shoot, I get a script. I get a call, and, you know, we'll sit down and talk about what he's thinking about doing, and then he goes off and starts to shoot, and I won't hear from him for like 2 or 3 months. Same thing happened with Casey with this.
And are you starting to do stuff in that time?
Well, with this, with Harriet, yeah. Sometimes with Spike, I don't, because Spike has such a unique cinematic vision. You can't go by just what's on the script.
I see.
Because he'll do some things visually that'll kind of send you in a different direction.
And then how hands-on is he when
not at all.
He leaves you to do your thing?
Yeah. But with Casey and with Harriet, you know, I started to just put together some ideas initially. But the thing that I started to realize was, man, I was coming at it from the perspective of a man's point of view. You know, because I tracked my voice, and I wanted to have this like kind of ancient or ancestral kind of sound, and I created this rhythm with my voice, and I was going to use that as the rhythmic propulsion for the thing. But then as the video started to come to me, I'm looking at it and I'm going, no, you can't do that. You know, you can't have a male's voice as the propulsion for the story about a female.
Wow.
So I had to go back and rethink, you know, my approach to the entire project.
Wow. How about with like BlacKkKlansman? By the way, I don't think I've ever been as aware of a score as I was watching that movie, and I saw it with Pete, but I also saw it 2 other times in a period of 3 weeks. 2 weeks. I just kept going back to see it again. It was as powerful the third time as it was the first, maybe more so. But the score, I was aware of the score in the best possible way, not as a distraction at all. But it just so drove that movie for me.
Thank you for saying that. It was that film was a unique moment in time, because Spike came to me and he said, "Hey man, I think I want an R&B band to be, you know, the driving sound in the score." And I said, "Well, cool, you know, I'm all for that." And when I got the idea to use Jimi Hendrix as inspiration for the thing, it kind of everything else just started to fall into place. Because I kept saying, at first I was just going to use orchestra, but then when John David comes in that opening scene, you know, with those jeans on, the leather jacket, and he
the hair, the hair, it was perfect. And I can, as you said that with Hendrix, I can hear that guitar bend in my ear, which I don't remember the score to any movie.
Well, look, but then listen, as soon as I saw that, I thought about Hendrix doing the national anthem. And it was interesting because I thought it was so appropriate, because for me, I remember as a kid hearing him do that just felt like he was screaming to the rest of the country, like, we're Americans too. You know, because I remember guys coming back with their military jackets from Vietnam and, you know, being in that struggle. And it seemed like he was saying, listen, we deserve all of the rights and protections just as much as anybody else, because we fought for this country just like anybody else. So that's when I said, you know what, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna use this guitar as the driving force behind the score.
I love that. I you're younger than I am, but I remember Hendrix playing that at Woodstock, and I was on my way and never got there, but watching that performance from the movie, he's my favorite guitar player of all time, and I got to. We had Mike Finnegan on recently. Mike played on "Still Raining, Still Dreaming." He played on "Electric Ladyland." Are you kidding me or what? I mean, oh my God!
Yeah. Listen, I mean, first of all, I've always thought Jimi Hendrix was a genius. Even with my electric band, the E Collective, we have a tune on the live album that I wrote for him. It's called Dear Jimmy. You know, because
I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah, you have to check it out because, and it's a ballad. But the thing about it is, when you would listen to Jimi Hendrix, you would forget that sometimes there were just three guys playing.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Completely.
And then the arrangements were just like well beyond their time. Well beyond their time.
So did you, okay, so I want to talk about that because I'm a little intimidated about the whole jazz thing. I feel like...
Me too.
No, so I'm serious. I feel very inept in somebody was sending me notes about things I should talk to you about jazz. I can't talk to you about jazz.
Okay.
Jazz is not. I mean, I have an appreciation now, but it's way over my head.
Okay.
But every musician I've ever interviewed has always had their heart and their soul in jazz. And Jimmy Vivino was telling me that all music is rooted from jazz. That's what he said, and he could explain why.
Sure.
But when you're a little kid and you're listening to music, I know you come from a family where there was music in your house. I've heard that.
Yes.
Your father was an opera singer? Was he an opera singer?
He was an amateur opera singer. My father loved opera. My mom's sister taught piano and voice. My grandfather played the guitar. So it was a house where music was very much a focal point of our daily life.
Was it all genres of music? Was it a specific kind of music?
No, it's mostly spiritually based music and operatic based music and classical music. You know, so I was kind of like the black sheep of the family, coming home talking about Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Clifford.
Okay, so where did you get that jazz appreciation? Because that's very sophisticated music.
Well, I mean, just growing up in New Orleans, first of all, and then, you know, I met Wynton and Branford when I was in elementary school, and they told me about an arts high school called NOCA, which is New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts. And then when I got there, man, I was introduced to Clifford Brown, Miles Davis, and the entire thing, you know, from their dad, Ellis. And I was just intrigued. Back then, I was just intrigued about this.
Were you playing music already?
Yeah, I've been playing music since I was 5 years old.
But you started on piano?
Yeah, I started on piano, then I picked up the trumpet, 4th grade.
Okay, and why did you pick up, I know the story, but let's tell. Why did you pick up the trumpet?
Well, there was a guy named Alvin Alcorn who came to my elementary school and gave a demonstration in New Orleans traditional music, man. And whenever I heard him play, I can see it right now. We were in the cafeteria at 4th.
Of course.
And, you know, we're sitting on the floor. We're elementary school kids, and I'm looking up at him. He seemed like a giant at the time. And then when I became a grown-up, I was looking down at him, you know. But when he played, you know, there was such a vibrato and a very kind of vocal-like quality to what he was doing. And I had been playing piano at the time. And I said, piano can't do that. So I went home that day and I told my dad, I said, hey, Dad, I want to play the trumpet. And my dad was like really pissed off because he had just got me a piano, you know, at the house. Yeah, that was a moment in time in my life. But, you know, going back to the thing about the jazz musicians, the thing that was interesting about that to me was I was always a believer in the American dream. And I was always, at that time, even though I was a young kid, I grew up to believe that, you know, if you accomplished your goal, there would be recognition for you. So the thing about jazz that blew me away was there were these great musicians who could play in this incredible way that we didn't know about. They weren't household names. You know, how come Charlie Parker wasn't a household name? Clifford Brown or any of those guys. So it really intrigued me, and I started to feel like I was being kept away from something, you know? So I just put my whole life into that. So, you know, my kids, they make a joke about it, about how there's a whole period of like pop music that I'm not really familiar with.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you next. So you didn't listen to that stuff at all?
For about 3 or 4 years, I didn't listen to any pop music.
So like the Beatles were not in your...
I mean, I got around to listening to it later on.
But I mean, when you're a little kid there, you're not listening to that.
No, I was listening to some other things. Because
even as a little kid, you're listening to jazz.
Well, no, it probably started. Well, growing up in New Orleans, you're going to hear it anyway. But it probably started when I was about in 6th grade, 6th to 7th grade. You know, and then it just progressed from there because I was just like totally blown away. I heard Clifford Brown play, and I'm like, wait a minute, how come everybody doesn't know about this dude? Did you hear what he just did on his trumpet? I never heard anybody do that, and nobody's talking about it. It just mystified me.
So it seems like you had a purpose early on. You were going to shine a light there.
Yeah, and then it also, in listening to John Coltrane, it triggered something in me too about purpose, because when I heard him play Alabama, which is a piece that he had written for the 4 little girls that were killed in Alabama, it made me weep. I cried, you know. And then when I listened to Max Roach's Freedom Now Sweet, you know, I started to understand that that these guys had a connection to their communities, you know, and they were trying to make statements, social statements with their music. And then all of a sudden, music took on a different purpose. And I shouldn't say different, because it was kind of always there, because I grew up in the church, playing in the church. So for me, music always had some type of purpose.
Did you sing?
For about 5 minutes. They had me in the choir for literally, I mean, maybe about 1 or 2 songs, and they said, doesn't he play that horn?
Yeah. Well, but I'm thinking, if you're playing trumpet, there's something going on there that...
Oh, yeah, it was going on. It just wasn't going on with what everybody else was doing. Yeah, it was going on, all right. It was fun.
So, all right, so you weren't listening to popular... So were you political... Okay, you were a little younger than me, but I grew up in the 60s, and I was marching on Washington when I was, I don't know, 12 years old.
Really?
Yeah, it's 1968, I was marching. And so that you were too young for all of that stuff.
Yeah, but still, you got to remember, I came along in the 70s, right after that. You know, James Brown said "Loud and Black and Proud" was the thing. You know, so we were very politically motivated.
I mean, in the early 70s, we were marching about racism in the schools because they were trying to throw away the books. They were trying to throw away the books.
Oh no, and plus, like I told you, I remember a lot of guys in my neighborhood coming back, you know, with PTSD, you know, and they would be wandering the streets, and it was an interesting time. Yeah, so we were all politically motivated. That's been a part of my life for the longest time. It's a
big part of your life now.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like I didn't choose it. I feel like it chose me. You know, and that really kicked in after Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're from New Orleans.
Yes.
You were there at the time. What was that experience for you?
Well, what happened was I was actually in LA because I was teaching at USC, and I woke up that morning and I looked at the news and I said, you know what, I got to get home. I was supposed to teach. So I flew home.
You went there?
Yeah, because I had to get my family out of the city.
Wow.
You know, because my wife is from D.C. and she never really experienced a hurricane. And I said, you know what, we got to get out of here. So we packed up. I packed up the house and put the kids in the car, and along with some other friends, we drove to Atlanta. But the thing that really got me motivated about it was after Atlanta, we realized we couldn't go home. So I had the apartment here. And we came here for a little bit, and it was rough. It was rough because we got here. As soon as we got here, we went and bought clothing for the kids and stocked the refrigerator at the apartment that I had at the time. And next thing you know, the banking system went down. None of the credit cards worked. So we were lucky. Yeah, we were lucky for that. And then afterwards, we couldn't get our kids in school. Every school that we had called in the neighborhood kept telling us stuff like, oh, we need to consult our lawyers, blah, 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 blah.
What?
So my agent at the time, Sam Schwartz, who's still my agent now, Sam Schwartz called the school at the time, Oakwood, you know, and Margot was the headmaster there. And she said, no, bring the kids here. And what happened was, at the time, Bush was on television talking about everything that they were doing for the kids and everything. And I was like, and I was saying to myself, no, that's not what's going on. And I started to think about all of the people in New Orleans who looked like me that were being called refugees. You know, and I go, that's an unfortunate term because they're not refugees. These people are trying to survive, you know. But it triggered something in me, like somebody has to speak up for them. Somebody has to say something.
Getting goosebumps again.
You know? So I was enraged, you know, and I felt like wherever I went, I had to represent the people who were suffering in my hometown. It was the wildest thing to look on television and to see neighborhoods that I knew totally destroyed. And the other part of it too that was like really powerful for me was we didn't have red or blue states then. When we were in Atlanta, I was, you know, getting my car serviced because I knew I was going to store it. I was getting 2 cars, my car and a truck service with, you know, brakes and gas and all of this stuff. oil changes and all of this stuff. And when I gave the guy at the counter my credit card and my driver's license, he said, "You're from New Orleans?" I said, "Yeah." And he went back and he went and talked to somebody, and he came back and gave me a receipt that says 0 balance. And he said, "We can't do much, but we can do this."
Oh.
And it made me realize we're humans, man. You know, we get caught up in this thing of like who's left, who's right, who's conservative, who's progressive. No, but at the end of the day, man, we're all human beings. And that's one of the things we tend to forget. So it's another reason why I was trying to say, okay, well, I need to create music that kind of goes down this path of talking about these issues. So that's when we came up with the album A Tale of God's Will, you know, and things just kind of progressed from there.
Yeah, we have to talk about that music too. So your family lost their homes in Katrina?
My mom lost her home. We had to rebuild it. It was a heartbreaking thing because I don't know how to explain it, but in New Orleans is surrounded by water. You have the river on one side and you have the lake on the other side. So we used to live, well, my mom still lives there, near the lake. And when we were driving this way to the lake, we kept seeing watermarks on houses that were 11 feet high, which meant that the water came this way. And as we're driving, my mom is saying, "I hope nothing happened to my house." And that broke my heart because I had already been to the house that night before, and because I wasn't going to be surprised on camera. So I went to the house, and it's still one of the hardest things to even deal with, I think, about when I had to take my mom to that home. Spike, you know, we've been friends for a long time, and when he shot that scene, he didn't come in the house.
He couldn't.
He stayed outside. And as a matter of fact, I remember when we started to edit the film and put it together, and we had already scored it and done everything. We had a screening in New York, and when we took a break, we were coming back in, and we were getting ready to do the portion, or to view the portion of my mom and myself. And they all tried to console me and try to get me prepared. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. I've been through the worst of it. You know, the worst of it is being there with my mom. You know what I mean? This is just, and the wild part about that too, we were scoring Inside Man when that happened. So Spike usually flies me to New York. He told me, he said, "No, you stay with your family. You stay in LA, and I'm going to come to you." And when we actually went into the studio to record the music, I'm out there with the orchestra conducting, doing the take. While I'm out there, Spike is talking to my mom, asking her, "How was the house? Did anything happen?" And she said, "Well, I haven't been in it yet." And then Spike goes, "Well, is it okay if I, tape you going into the house?" And she just immediately said yes. And I come in and Spike goes, "We're going to film your mom going in the house." And I go, "Okay." So later on, when we went back to the apartment, I told my mom, I said, "Are you sure you really want to do that? I mean, there's going to be a lot of people. It's a very private moment." And my mom said, no, people have to see what we're going through, And it's the reason why I wrote the tune on the album, Dear Mom, because I didn't know, I was proud of her taking that approach and having that stance, and I didn't know how to say thank you to her, so I wrote a tune for her instead.
And so we were talking about it before we went on the air that she lost all her photographs.
That was the hardest thing. I mean, I mean, it's funny because my aunt wound up having at least some of her photographs from her wedding and stuff like that. So, but some of the childhood photographs of her, and there was a photograph. People don't know this, but during my live show, I wear bracelets and I wear a wallet chain, right? But that's in tribute to my dad, because my dad was always a conservative guy. When I knew him, he was a church guy, sold insurance. I thought he was a cornball. You know what I mean? And then I saw this picture of him when he was a younger dude, and he had this wallet chain, pleated pants, and his sunglasses, and his hair was slicked back. And I'm like, who is that?
Wow.
Yeah. So it's one of the reasons why I do that, and I lost all of those photos. That's the thing, and the thing that hurts is that my kids don't get a chance to see that stuff.
And there's no like extended family outside of New Orleans that might have any duplications of
If
that
they
stuff?
do, they might. I don't think so. Because my dad was from Lafayette, Louisiana, Lake Charles, in that area. And by the time he moved to New Orleans, and he just didn't have interaction with the family in Lake Charles like that on a regular basis. So I don't think they'd have many photos.
That's heartbreaking.
It is, because it's one of the things you want to pass down to your kids, especially when you look at your kid. For example, I have one photo, and I put it up on my Facebook page years ago, of my dad in a singing group. It's called the Harlem Harmony Kings in 1932. And when I look at the photo, it looks like me standing there.
Aww.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so let's talk about your dad. So opera. So he was singing opera.
Yeah.
And you have come to now write your
crazy?
second opera. Okay, so I don't even understand this.
Me either.
Did you listen to when you were a kid? Were you listening to opera?
I mean, inadvertently. I wasn't. It was in the house. I wasn't sitting down listening to it, but my dad would.
Do you understand it? How do you understand opera? I don't even get this.
Yeah, well, no, my dad would tell me the stories about Carmen and everything like that. But the main thing about it was, he loved the music, and sometimes, he did have. I always tell a story, and it's true. Whenever my dad would put those records on, you would hear doors slamming in the house. Because everybody was trying to find a place to be quiet, It's like, oh, there he goes, And he'd be in the front
Would he sing
with his
along?
record. Oh, of course. And my dad would always say, "Boy, come and sit down. See," he said, "now this is music. See, you need to listen to this. You need to learn this. You have to doing all that other stuff, but you need to learn this stuff." And I just never really got into it at that point. I mean, I always appreciated it because I love melody, and those melodies are beautiful and strong. So obviously this stuff, seeped into my DNA. But it was so weird to get a call from Opera Theater St. Louis.
Okay, so why did they come to you? Why did that happen?
It just goes to show you how, having conversations with people can come back on you. So,
be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, well, Gene Dobbs Branford is the guy who runs the Jazz St. Louis. Years ago, when he was running this club, he brought me in town, and we were just talking, getting to know each other. I told him that my dad loved opera, and I heard a lot of opera in the house. Well, fast forward to Gene Dobbs Branford talking to Opera Theater St. Louis. They wanted to broaden their audience, so they were thinking about doing a jazz opera for kids. And Gene Dobbs Branford said, "Well, I think I have the perfect guy, because this guy said his dad loved opera, he heard opera, and he writes for movies and blah, 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 blah," and they put my name up. And then it went from just a children's opera to being something they want to put on the main stage.
And you're like the first African-American
composer
ever at the Metropolitan Opera.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool credit right there. That's important. That's important. You're doing important things.
It's an overwhelming thing, because I was talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday, because his mom sang with my dad, and his mom is still alive. She's 98 years old.
How long ago did your dad pass?
He's been gone almost 20 years. Yeah.
But he lived to see you be successful.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it was interesting having a conversation with him, because we were talking about this. We were talking about all of those African American people in New Orleans who loved classical music and were really a big part of that scene in the city, and never really gotten any recognition for it. And I said, "Dude, how ironic is it that I'm in this position now, doing this stuff?" When I did my first opera, Arthur Woodley, one of the male leads in the opera, he knew the story of my dad. And at the premiere, when I went up for the curtain call, he grabbed me, and as the audience was applauding, he grabbed me and whispered in my ear. He said, "Your dad is proud of you right now." And that blew me away. And then years later, now to have Peter Gelb, who's a person that I worked with when I was at Columbia Records, actually Sony Records, to have him call me and say, "We want to, stage your opera." It's one of those things you kind of stun for a second. I go, "Okay, I guess. Okay, and then I didn't know the other part of it until a journalist called me and wanted to interview me about it. And he said, you know that you're the first African American. I said, no, I didn't know that. And it still didn't register until he posted the article, and then the whole thing went viral. And then it hit me, you know, about
the magnitude of what you did.
Yeah, well, the magnitude of where my career is as far as that is concerned. You know, the interesting thing about it though is one of the things I've been saying is that okay, I may be the first, but I'm not the first that was able or had the talent to do it. You know, that's the thing. There've been composers before me who have written operas. And had the ability to write operas that didn't get the chance to do it. So it's one of that's things like that are the things that kind of make me work hard, you know, because I'm kind of like the guy that I don't want to be the weak link in the chain, you know.
Well, I don't think that's ever going to be a problem.
Well, you never know, but I try to make sure that I'm not. I try to. You know, I'm a little anal when it comes to certain things.
Okay, so I want to talk about your work ethic, which I can't even imagine. Okay, so you're a little kid. What's practicing? What is becoming a musician? What does that look like when you're a little kid?
Obsession. Yeah.
By choice, not hammered into you?
Oh, no, by choice. Because you love what you do and you're around other people. I grew up around Wynton, Marcellus, Branford, Donald Harrison.
Branford did one of my jams in New York back in the day.
Yeah, so those are the guys that I grew up, and I was the youngest, you know what I mean? So I was always looking up to those guys, and, you know, I knew that I wanted to do this. And
so you're like in a garage band with Wynton?
Actually, no, me and Branford were. Wynton was away at Tanglewood one summer.
God.
And we were playing dances, and I was the keyboard player in the band. It was hilarious. The band was called the Creators. You know, hey guys, what's up?
And what kind of music were you guys playing?
We were playing all the dance music, R&B music. We were playing all of the current hits and stuff like that. You know, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me because I didn't have to carry those keyboards.
Nah. So did you appreciate popular music?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, no, listen, Funkadelics, Jimi Hendrix, Paul and Funkadelics, Mandrill, all of the pops. Those were all the people that I loved. You know, yeah.
So you're a little kid. You're practicing by choice. Are you a good student? How's that going? How's school going for you?
Yeah, I was a good student. I was. Yeah, they used to call me a brainiac. But you know, listen, for me, I come from a family of educators, so there really wasn't much of a choice. You know, because when I came home, I was always being checked on what I was doing, what was my homework. Come in, let me see what you're doing. And then you think you would get a break going to another family member's house, and they're like, no, tell me about your school. And it's like, Jesus, man.
So did you get a teaching degree? I know you are an educator yourself now.
Yeah, no, because I went to Rutgers, and when I went to Rutgers, I started playing with Art Blakey my second year in school. And I was 19 when I started playing with him, and I didn't get a chance to finish school. But I've always studied, you know, even while I was playing with Art Blakey. I had been studying composition since I was 16 years old. And then I switched from Roger Dickinson, who was the guy that I studied with in New Orleans. Roger told me about a guy in New York who was a great composer. His name was Hale Smith. And I studied with Hale Smith as well. So I'm the
thirsty
type of person.
For knowledge.
Yeah, I'm always trying to learn. You know, I always feel, and I've been taught this. It's just my trumpet teacher, Bill Fielder, always used to tell me. He said, "Always be gratified, never satisfied." That was a statement. Always be gratified, never satisfied.
Wow.
Yeah. So he used to tell me that all the time. So those are like the little things that I've always been in.
There was another quote that you said in an interview I heard today that somebody else said something about if you're good at what you do, successful. What is that? Oh
yeah, no, Art Blakey, you know, always used to say to us, if you have something to offer, the world will be the path to your door. You know, and that's when he said, you know, don't be bitter. He said, work at your craft, make a statement, have something to give back.
So what did that look like for you, and what does that look like for you now? So when you're growing up and you're a student and you're doing all that, what's your what kind of time are you putting into your to music?
I'm putting a lot of time into it. I mean, my practice, I would, when I was in high school, I'll never forget. I used to try to wake up in the morning and do my trumpet warm-ups in the morning. Then I'll go to school and I'll eat my lunch real quick and then run to the practice room and try to practice. And then they would bus us from my regional school to the arts high school that I went to, have my music classes, and then after that I try to practice before I had to go to like a rehearsal or something like that, and I go home, try to do my homework, and then practice again. So that was kind of like the way.
And that was your own self-imposed discipline.
Yeah.
And so when did music start becoming, like, when did you start doing gigs? And
from the time I was about 15 years old. I remember I was 14. I was playing with this dance band. I was 14 years old. We were playing this club. And
how'd you play a club? You're not even old enough to play a club.
So we're playing this club, and I'm one of the trumpet players in the band, man. And it was funny because the guys. We took a break, and I'm all excited because all these grown women are walking around looking at me, going, "Look at him!" And the guys in the band gave me a beer. They said, "Hey, don't drink it. You just hold it. It'll make you look older. Don't drink it though." Just I'm sitting there in this chair with this beer in my hand, and while the music is playing during the break, all of a sudden the music goes down to hear Terence Blanchard, "Your father's at the front."
Oh,
oh my God, that was embarrassing.
So let's talk about that. I mean, the world of jazz and music and all of that and substances, that never called to you?
No, I mean, I drink now, but no, back then, no, because we had this kind of...
you were around it.
We were always around it, but we had this, I don't want to say a mandate. It wasn't a mandate, but we kind of looked at it as being the thing the reason that people used to not deal with musicians because they were drug addicts, because they were this, because they were that, knowing that wasn't the case. But our thing was, we're not trying to give anybody any extra reason to look at us negatively. You know what I mean? If you look at where we were back then, we always tried to dress a certain way. We always spoke a certain way. We tried to come off a certain way. Whenever we did the interviews, we were never trying to go none of that stuff, because we were trying to set the table, because we knew that these musicians were great musicians, right? They were geniuses, but given any little crack, the negativity was the thing that was focused on. So we tried to make sure there would be none of that stuff to focus on.
Where did you learn that ethic? Did your father instill that? Did your parents instill that in you?
Everybody. My father, the church, the school, everybody. My father, when I would be on my way out to a gig, he'd grab me, "Hey man, don't let nobody make you do this or do anything like that." I used to hear that all the time. And then part of it was just me too. Just
your own sensibility.
Yeah, because I felt like I had a sense of pride about this lineage that I was becoming a part of, and while these musicians that came up in front of me were brilliant musicians, we noticed that people weren't focusing on their brilliance. They were focusing on this one little thing that everybody was doing, and it wasn't just them. But for them, it was a thing that were used to focus negative attention towards. So we tried to eliminate as much of that as possible. Now, today is a different day. Those kind of biases, there are biases that still exist, obviously, but that stuff is not the thing that people focus on, with jazz musicians, because there's a lot of other things to talk about. There's a lot of other things to deal with.
And when did you start, like, making a living? Like, how did you segue into being a professional musician? That's your, like, I imagine you never had a plan B.
No, I didn't believe in plan Bs.
I don't believe in plan B. Yeah. Did you ever have like a job? Did you ever have to do a job?
No.
Okay, that's pretty cool. You're one of the only musicians I've ever spoken to
really?
that never had to do a job.
No,
that's pretty cool right there.
No, but I started making money when I was in high school. I would play gigs. I'd get called for certain gigs, for those big band gigs, those society gigs where you have to sit down and read. There was a big band at the Blue Note Hotel, Dix DeBille's big band. those trumpet players, I knew all of those guys, and when some of those guys couldn't make the gig, they'd call me to come in and sub for them, so I would go in and do that. And then as soon as I left to go to college, I went to Rutgers University. Mm-hmm. The guy who was directing the band played in Lionel Hampton's big band. So I got to school 2 weeks early, and they didn't have any housing for me. So I stayed with him, and he took me on one of Lionel Hampton's gigs and told me to bring my horn. And I'm riding on the bus with some of the guys, and we're talking about trumpet stuff. So we get to the site, and they asked me to pull out my horn to hear me play. And Lionel Hampton walks up behind me while that's going on. And he goes, hey, he called everybody Champ. He said, hey, Champ, let me hear you play blues with the piano player. So he heard me play, and then he said, I'm going to call you for some gigs. And the next week I was on the road with Lionel Hampton.
That is just crazy.
Yeah, so I was playing with him when I was 18 years old.
Wow. And so how did the playing segue? Okay, when did you win your first award? Are you a composer before or after you start?
It was all during.
Everything's happening simultaneously.
Yeah, because I always had a fascination for how music was put together.
Had you written songs before you became a composer?
Well, no. Well, it's hard to say because I started composing when I was 15, 16 years old.
What?
Yeah, my composition teacher, Roger Dickerson, had me write a 6-note piano concerto that I lost in a hurricane. I called it Fantasy in Space. I don't know why, but that was the title of it. I'd written that when I was 16 years old, so I was always writing, along with playing. So it's kind of hard to say which one came first.
Okay, I did not know. Okay, so this is interesting. So how did your first composing gig happen?
Well, when I left Lionel Hampton's band, I had already done like some big band arrangements for like high school. I remember I had done this big band arrangement of Rocky when I was in high school. Yeah, it was hilarious, Murnell Ferguson had done it, so I said, well, man, I want to try to do. So I did this thing and written it out for the big band, and we went to this competition, and they created a category because they didn't have an arranging category.
Wow.
So they created.
So you won your first award. I like it.
Yeah, 15 years old, 15, 16.
So, okay, so what's your first film? Okay, so now all right. So you meet. From what I understand, you were doing you were a session player with Spike at first, right? Uh-huh. And so, how did that become a relationship?
Well, from the first session, because I walked in with my Lakers gear on, and he was a little upset about that, but that's all right. Hey, man, they were the champs. You got to take the title, baby.
And you didn't know at the time that Spike
I had no idea.
We were talking about this before we went on the air. Spike is so loyal about the Knicks and also about NYU. My daughter goes to NYU, and when we went to the screening, as soon as he found out she went right for her, and he started talking to her in total earnest about it.
Right. So, and he's always been loyal, so he remembered me from that. Mm-hmm. And then we were doing Mo Better Blues, and we were doing the pre-recorded music for the band to sing to. And we took a break, and when I sat down to play, I was working on some music for my upcoming album with Columbia Records, solo project, and I was sitting at the piano playing a tune that I'd written for these kids that were massacred in South Africa. It was called Sing Soweto. And Spike heard it, and when he heard it, he goes, man, I love that. He said, but what is it? I told him what it was. He says, can we use it in Mo Better Blues? And I said, sure. He said, so we just recorded it, just me playing a melody, no accompaniment or anything like that. And they shot the scene with Denzel on the bridge. And when after Spike shot the scene, he called me up and he says, hey, man, you think you could write a string arrangement for it? And I said, sure. What's a string arrangement? But I called my composition teacher, Roger, told him about it. And
is this the first thing you're orchestrating, or had you? Yeah.
No, I had never written for orchestra before. So I did the arrangement and brought it in. And what was so funny was I brought it in and I handed the music to Spike's dad, and Spike's dad goes, "No, you wrote it, you conducted." I went, "Damn, okay." Wow. So luckily I had taken some sight singing classes, so I knew what 1, 2, 3, 4. I knew what that was. This hand didn't have any responsibility whatsoever. It was pretty embarrassing, but we got through it. And then Spike came up to me afterwards and he said, you know, you got a future in this business. And I went, oh, I thought he was just encouraging me, you know. And I said, oh, thank you, man. Then he called me to do Jungle Fever, you know, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
And so, do you guys have what's it like when you're starting a project? So he gives you a script right from the beginning. You don't really start writing because it's Spike's filming.
Yeah.
And so once it's filmed, you go in. What's the process? How long is that process for you?
It depends. A lot of it depends on his shooting schedule because he'll call me before he starts to shoot and he'll give me the script and I'll go through it. And it varies. Like with Miracle at St. Anna, what was really cool about that, they were shooting in Italy, but he would send me like still photos from the set. So I use those still photos as like my screensaver on my computer. And I started getting inspiration from that, so I would start to write from that. But a lot of times I try to wait on Spike because I remember, I think it was Summer Sam. There was some scenes in that, man, I was trying to write before, and I remember there was one scene I had read the dialogue. It was with Mir Sorvino and John Leguizamo, where they were coming from Studio 54, and they got into an argument. But in the scene, Spike shoots the empty chair of the car, where Mir Sorvino gets out of the car, and it just threw me for a loop. I went, well, that visual triggered something else musically in me. So I said, you know what? I got to learn how to wait on Spike because what I realize is when I read his scripts, that's my movie that I'm seeing in my brain, you know, and I have to.
And your movie is different than his movie.
Yeah, because the pacing is different, the visuals are different.
It's interesting that you brought that one up. My brother went to school with David Berkowitz in the Bronx.
I'm
serious. And Michael Imperioli, who wrote the screenplay, is a friend of mine who wrote that. Yeah, but we lived in the Bronx and Columbus High School, and David Berkowitz was 1 year ahead. And
wow.
Yeah.
Did you know it? Did you?
I did not. I'm a little younger, and my parents were divorced. I went to high school in Queens, but my brother went to high school with him. Crazy. That movie was insane. That's such a great movie.
It is. I think one of my favorite scenes in that movie is when I think it's Yogi Berra. He's calling a baseball game, and as he's calling the baseball game, it's actually calling what you're seeing on the screen. You know, there's a woman who comes out, and David is walking up, and then he goes, "Oh, swing and a miss," and the woman walks back inside. Yeah,
I have to watch that again now that you said that. Wow, that's intense. So. And then you worked with my friend Mike Binder. Black or White. So what was that? What's it like working with Mike? Hi, Mike.
What's up, Mike?
I love Mike.
No, he's a good dude, man. He's funny as hell. You know, listen. When you work with guys who are really good at their job, it's easy. It's easy. You know, there's nothing to it. One of the things about working with him was, you know, he knew he put together a good movie. He understood what he did. He understood what I did.
Did he leave you be to do your thing?
Part, you know, I come up.
Did he have ideas?
Yeah, of course, of course. You know, I would come up with some ideas. I'd play them for him. He'd say, "Hey, man, I like this. I think it should be this," and blah 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 blah. And it was an easy thing to work, easy time working with him. And then when we got into the studio, I'm gonna tell this story, Mike. We got into the studio. He's one of those directors that doesn't really let on how much he knows about music. Oh. Yeah. But it comes across because we're sitting there, you know, listening to one of the playbacks, and he goes, "Hey, man, those string players are out of tune." And I went, "Yeah. Hey."
What do you do about that?
Hey, they were out of tune. I went out and said, "Hey, you guys need to tune up." You know.
How can professional musicians that are doing that be out of tune?
Well,
that happens, huh?
Yeah, it happens.
It happens. So I'm assuming there's been other experiences where the directors didn't know so much what they were doing that weren't as fun?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, I've worked with other directors that think they know about music, and they will do some things that you just go, okay. But, you know, the interesting thing, that's only happened to me about once or twice.
Did you ever feel like walking?
Well, yeah, of course. But the interesting thing about those directors, I don't see them around.
Really?
No, they're not around. No. As a matter of fact, after those projects, they were not around. Yeah.
What as a movie goer, Can you think of any scores that really impacted you? Like, because
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, God. Okay, Pete.
Thomas Newman.
Oh, yeah.
Pete was in Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
I worked on it for 2 months, naked in the shower. Hey.
Next to Tim.
That's me.
When you walked in, dude.
Right when I walked in.
Okay. You know what's my favorite scene musically in there? I mean, it's a sad scene, but when Jack Whittemore hangs himself.
Yep.
That musical cue there is like amazing. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I was obsessed with that score for the longest. As a matter of fact, I had to try to get away from it, because I kept trying. I'm like,
you were impacted. It was affecting. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things the other thing about that movie to me, it's one of the great American movies of all time. And I always think about what was the pitch to get it made. Can you imagine somebody trying to pitch that movie today? Oh yeah, I want to do a movie about this dude in jail, and it's not one of the typical type of jail movies. Mm-hmm. It's a really great movie, man.
It's a great movie. That's so funny. Pete just went back for the 25th anniversary.
Rob 25th, yeah. 3-day event, 30,000 people. The director was there, and he was talking about Rob Reiner absolutely wanted to direct it.
Wow.
With, I think, Brad Pitt.
Oh, really?
And, it was crazy, the cast they want. It would have been probably great, but a different movie.
Different movie, yeah. No, I think Tim Robbins, and it was,
it was amazing. Ron Bonfiglio, why do you keep saying what? Rob is plays with Brian Wilson. But he keeps saying what? To everything you say, he's going, what? And I don't know why he keeps saying what.
Because he's totally out of his skin into this interview.
Okay.
That's so cool.
Okay.
And you have a couple questions, which will did somebody had a question?
Yeah, there's a couple questions.
Okay, let's have them, Pete.
All right, let's see. Let me see. Let's see. This is actually Rob. I want to hear about his time with Art Blakey.
Oh man, playing with Art Blakey was probably the thing that kind of set me up for the rest of my life.
How so?
Well, I always tell people I was with him for 4 years, but I felt like I aged 40 because there was no time for development. It was like you go from being, in the NCAA to being in the pros, and there was no grace period.
Did he mentor you through that?
No.
No, you just sink or swim.
Yeah, I mean, well, he mentored me in the way that he left me to my own devices to figure it out. But what he did was, I always describe being with Art Blakey as like being on a table. As long as you're on this table, you can roam around and do whatever you want. But as soon as you get to the edge, he might go, "Hey, go back the other direction." You know what I mean? So he let us do a lot of things, man. And he always would talk to us about professionalism. I remember one of the things he always used to say. He used to say, "You better practice, because when you don't practice, first night of the show, you know it. The second night, the band knows, and third night, the audience knows it."
Wow.
He was full of things like that. And the thing that I was telling, that we said earlier about if you have something to offer the world, will be the path to your door. I'm
still waiting for them to be the path to my door.
So Rob also wanted to know, when we were talking about the Hendrix thing before, the guitar player on the score, was it Charles Altura?
Charles Altura, who's a guitarist in the E Collective, the electric band that I have. Charles is phenomenal.
I can hear that riff right now in my head, and I can't say that about any other movie I've seen.
He is phenomenal. And plus he's one of those guys. He's like a freak of nature, Like he'll play the guitar, and then after the show, man, he'll sit down at the piano and play Chopin. Went to a jam session. We were in Cuba, and he went to a jam session, and he didn't play the jam session on guitar. He played it on piano. No, he's just one of those type of dudes. I mean, he's brilliant. He went to Stanford University.
That's some serious stuff.
Yeah, not for music.
Like math or something?
Anthropology.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, Rob Bonfiglio. Oh, there's his Trouble Again album. He's a great songwriter himself. Okay. He's married to Carney Wilson.
Oh yeah.
And so Brian's his father-in-law. But he's an unbelievable singer, and he's a great guitarist. So he's sitting here awing on you big time. He's fanning on you big time.
Like crazy.
Hey man, listen. I'm fanning on Charles every night. Whenever we play, I just listen to this guy and I go, wow. And I told Charles, I said, listen, man. I said, just keep doing what you're doing. I said, it's going to take a while for people to really get get to where you are, because he looks like a rock and roll dude. You know what I mean? But the way he plays is some otherworldly stuff. He comes, and and he can play in any situation.
So now, how did you put this band together? Okay, let's talk about. Let's roll back. First Grammy Award. Like, what is that like when you get that recognition, doing what you love to do?
It's an overwhelming thing, you know. It's one of those things where I never saw myself being at the Grammys. I never thought about that. But then when I was there, it blew me away. And you know, and it's in a weird way for me. I always go back to my kids. You know, it makes me proud that I'm doing something that my kids would probably be proud of. Yeah. You know,
do they appreciate jazz?
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, my son actually wrote a tune on my first E-Collective record, and he did the spoken word portions of it. He's a great songwriter in his own right. Wow. And my daughter, Sydney, my son is named J. Ray Oliver. My daughter...
Oliver's your middle name, yeah?
Yes. And my daughter, Sydney, she's a...
Is she Berkeley School?
Berkeley School of Music.
Very
she's a great pianist and... great producer and songwriter herself, actually gave us the title for our first E-Collective record, Branford. She's the one that came up with the title for that, and another tune called Cosmic Warrior.
And what is she a jazz pianist?
No, she's writing songs. She can play jazz. She does that, but that's not really what she.
So what?
She has a band called Priestess. Yeah, so they're getting ready to put out their first record.
Nice. Yeah. And so what would you call her?
It's alternative.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's an interesting thing about her because she wants to write, you know, songs and stuff, but she has ears like a jazz musician. She has her ears are better than mine. She has phenomenal ears. I remember when she was a kid, I come home and she was playing that Piano Please for Elise with no music, and I said, how are you doing that? And then she was playing it from here. Yeah, she was a little kid.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just the way she is. She doesn't tell anybody. She tries not to put it out there. She'll never say it, and she tries to act like it's not there, but she can really hear.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm in awe of her.
And so, winning that first Grammy up until you won one this year from that piece from BlacKkKlansman, right? Does it still have that thrill?
Oh, of course. You know what was crazy about it? We found out while we were at the BAFTAs.
Where you also were nominated.
Yeah.
And so now, so Academy Award Come on. Academy Award nomination.
Okay, but I got to tell you, I got to tell you about the BAFTA thing. So as I was losing to Lady Gaga, right?
Oh, we got to talk about that.
Yeah,
too.
that's what's so funny. And I didn't get a chance to tell her this, but you know, as I was losing to Lady Gaga, somebody turned around and you just won the Grammy.
Oh my!
At the ceremony.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was funny.
Well, that's a nice justice right there.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Lady Gaga in a minute. So where are you when you hear you are nominated for an Academy Award?
I was in Boston because I was teaching at Berkeley College of Music, and me and my daughter were sharing an apartment at the time.
Sweet.
Yeah, and my wife called me and said, you got nominated. And I'm like, what? You know, and we videotaped us calling my mom. Because, you know, my mom, we have this joke with my mom. My mom never gets really affected by anything, you know what I mean? Like, we always have this joke with my mom, I just became president of the United States. And she'd be like, that's nice. But listen, can you take my garbage out? That's my mom, you know? You know what I mean?
Jay Leno has a very funny joke about he called his mom and said, Mom, I'm on the cover of Time magazine. She goes, I don't think we get that here.
Right. So when you know, we videotaped it because I was thinking my mom was going to have a certain type of reaction. But she was really great. You know, she said, I'll always, I forgot what she said, but it became something really nice. And then actually, my daughter jumped on my back and videotaped this guy got nominated for an Oscar, and it wound up in the role with all of the Oscar reactions for the Oscars at the luncheon.
Oh,
yeah, I don't know. I guess my wife sent it to him or something like that. But it was cute.
And so, what was that like going there that day? Well, what was that whole experience like?
It was an amazing experience.
Because that's like a whole different thing.
It is. It's very different, and I didn't know what to expect, but I loved every moment of it because everybody was so nice and so gracious. And even the guys in my category, we were all like rooting for each other. We were hanging out at all of the events together, you know. And it's just like really strange because you're at these things and you're hanging out with these actors and actresses, and everybody's just cool. You know, there's no pretense.
Okay, now this is a really weird thing to admit, but I can't. Was it Stars Born that? What won?
For the score?
Yeah.
Black Panther.
Black Panther. Okay.
Yeah. But here's the other thing about it too. It's like being in that environment. It's you get to the point where okay, you know, there's the award, right? But that's not the thing that you really start to focus on while you're going to all of these events. You know, you start to feel this camaraderie amongst all the other people. And the thing that I was like really focusing on was, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but just in terms of race and gender, I think that was probably one of the most diverse classes
across the board
in Oscar history.
I think that's true.
Yeah, so because when we went to the luncheon and they started to call all these names and you saw all these women coming up, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I was standing next to Regina King, you know, doing the for the luncheon. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and I think your score is going to stand the test of time for a very, very long time.
Thank you
that is just, I cannot think of that movie for 1 second without hearing your music.
Well, thank you.
And I really, except Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind, I think of.
Well,
right? No, but it's true. When I think of Gone with the Wind, I hear the music. When I think of The Wizard of Oz, I think of the music.
Right.
When I think of BlacKkKlansman, I think of the music. And that is a rare thing.
Thank you.
That is a really... So, is Harriet... what is it like when you come off... because BlacKkKlansman was such an important movie on so many levels.
Yeah.
And then to move into another one... what if you can't just do a little comedy now? Have you ever done a little comedy?
Yeah, I have. I've done a few.
Is that fun or not?
Comedies are fun. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it's with going from that to Harriet, you just have to kind of divorce yourself away from the prior thing. And Harriet's story is so powerful. It kind of envelops you by itself. And the other thing too is that with Casey and Cynthia and all of those veteran actors,
Leslie Odom Jr. I saw him in Hamilton.
Clark Peters, Vonda Curtis, all of those
fantastic
guys.
cast.
Yeah,
amazing.
Vanessa Bell Calloway. You know, when you see their performances, you kind of have like an oh shit moment, like like don't be the weak link in the chain. You know what I mean? Because like everybody did their thing, and it becomes an inspiring thing to write music for, because we were all trying to do this for Harriet. That was the thing that everybody talked about.
I don't think we talked about it on the air. I think we were talking about it before, about the timing of this and how important it is.
Oh, it's extremely important. I mean, the timing of it couldn't be more important. I mean, given everything that's going on, the things that are happening in our country, the denial about having her on the bill, I think is incredible, because when you think about what's going on in our country and you think about this woman and how she gave her life to do for others, it's the most selfless thing anybody could ever do in their life. That's why it's so important for our veterans, for us to thank them, because these guys are putting their lives on the line all the time, So to have somebody like that not be recognized is a shame.
For those of you who don't know the story, other than the fact that she helped emancipate people, the extent to which she did it and the personal risk that she took, a woman alone going back in there again and again and again. And also the empowerment for women is just extraordinary. Oh,
and here's the thing about it, too. There's one of the shots in the film was one of my favorites, is when she's walking in that very expansive field, and you see this little diminutive woman walking across the field. You know, I've been saying, you know, it's you try not to make light of it, but it's the perfect embodiment of it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.
Ooh.
You know, and we had a screening of it not too long ago, and I was telling the audience, I said the other thing that's like interesting being African American, like watching this movie, is like I've seen so many women in my family and friends that I grew up with that seem to be direct descendants of that strength and that power and that resilience. You know what I mean? And it was a beautiful thing to be a part of. You know, it's a beautiful thing to sit on a stage to watch the producers who are women, to watch the director who's a woman, the main character who's a woman.
Fantastic.
And watch them talk about what they did to bring this story to life. I'm just happy. I'm honored to be a part of it.
So, what is there anything that you haven't done? You're working on a documentary now. We won't talk about that now, but that'll be out in some time. Is there anything that you haven't yet done that calls to you?
I haven't done an action film.
Ooh.
You know, being a trumpeter.
Do you like that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You watch those. You like those.
Of course.
Yeah. You're a guy.
Yeah, of course. You like watching things blow up.
So like a like a Marvel comic thing?
Yeah, I've never done any of those things, you know, yeah. And I mean, but think about it, I'm a trumpet player, so, you know, I remember the first time I heard Star Wars, I was like totally just amazed at all the trumpet fanfares in the film. I remember watching it going, for a minute I couldn't watch the movie. You know, I'm sitting, I remember I was in Chicago, I'll never forget this. I was playing with our Blakey, you know, and I go to the film and I'm like, who the hell wrote this? You know, and so, yeah, so to get a chance to do those types of things.
By the way, there's an entire album, and it's all orchestrated, the music, but it's a disco.
Get out. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I have to hear that.
I see Rob's asking if you live in town. Do you still keep a home in New Orleans?
I still have my home in New Orleans.
But yeah, we are at Terence's actually right now.
Yeah.
And it only took an hour and 45 minutes for me to get here. It literally took the last half of a mile took 11 minutes.
You know what's so funny about you saying that? So I just moved here in June. And it's been funny because, you know, we're living in an apartment now, but we're looking for a place, and we just found a place. And while we were looking, everybody's asking, so where are you looking? Where are you looking? You got to think about the traffic now. And I'm like, man, please. But now I see what
it's this. You live in, it's a clusterfuck to get to this place. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. I made one wrong turn getting off the 405, and it said, it will now take you 14 minutes to go 1 mile.
Oh yeah, and look, it took me an hour and a half to get here because I was some other place at 5, and
it's crazy.
And I literally got on the 110, and it was just a parking lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was going. I said, but I'm not going to sit here. So I just got off the highway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I just turned on the maps, and I just listened to that little woman's voice tell me where to go.
Yeah, well, Waze literally had me going right, left, right, left, right. Just to like try to avoid the traffic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Do we have any more questions, Pete?
We do.
Okay, let's go.
All right, let's see. We have... Let's get back to them. Let's see. Oh, Veronica.
Yeah.
Or actually, Verona Towns would like to know any new projects coming up.
Yeah. Well, we just finished Spike's next movie. That's part of one of the things that I was working on today.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Well, it's called The Five Bloods. It's about 4 Vietnam veterans who go back to pick up the remains of one of the fallen brothers. Stars Chadwick Boseman, Delroy Lindo, Isaiah Whitlock, Clark Peters, and Norm. I can't think of Norm's last name right now, but he did it again. It's a phenomenal movie. Working on that. I have a TV show.
I was going to ask you about this.
Yes.
Is this your first TV? Do you do TV?
No. I've done TV before. I had a series a few years ago called Shots Fired for Fox. That was really a good show.
How do you feel? How does that measure up? How does it measure up doing?
It's a different beast because it's episodic, you know, and you got to work real quick. But it's still fun.
Do you like it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I always love challenges like that, you know. And this next one that I'm going to do, there's some challenges because it's a period piece, but we don't want period music per se, so.
Is it network or?
No.
It's like the Netflixy, Amazon-y kind of thing?
No, it's network.
Okay.
It's network. Okay. But what I want to do is I want to do some exploration in terms of sampling acoustic instruments, but not using them in the normal way, to create these sonic palettes. So let's see what happens.
I like it.
Yeah.
And you play out. You still gig and Okay, so I see on
I'm gonna be in St. Louis next week.
Okay, tell us where are you gonna be?
I'm gonna be at the Jazz Bistro.
Okay.
Yeah, next week.
So 3 days ago, I see this video on your Facebook, and there you are with Lady Gaga. Just you and Lady Gaga alone. Okay, I thought it was a stage. It wasn't a stage.
No.
What happened?
Well, during the Oscar luncheon, she was seated at my table. And we were introduced, and she says, "Oh, you're a jazz musician?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, I do a show. I do a jazz show. I do music at Dine in Washington." I'm like, "What?" Okay, and then we just kind of connected from there, and we just she said, "I gotta have you come out." And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't think nothing of it. And then Laura Cartman, who's one of the governors, had the dinner for the actors and the musicians who were nominated because Lady Gaga was in both categories.
Right.
So we're at this dinner at someone's house. Herbie Hancock showed up, and Herbie started to play. Nick Britell had played earlier, and Mark Shaman had played. And then Herbie got up to play, and I had my horn, and so Herbie said, "Man, let's play together." So we wound up playing together. And with Herbie, you never know where he's going to go. So I had my eyes closed, concentrating on what he was playing because he could go a lot of different directions. And I opened my eyes and I said, "Man, I know I've been drinking, but I must be drunk. And that looks like Lady Gaga grooving in what we're doing." And sure enough, it was her. And next thing I know, she sang 3 songs with us.
Oh.
And then she said, Did
anybody record that?
No.
No.
There were no recordings.
Okay.
No. But she said, "Yeah, we got to have you come out and do the show." And man, I forgot about it, but they had been talking to my agent, for months about setting it up, and they were really nice, really gracious. I got there. Brian McCollum, who's the guy who runs the band, does all of the arrangements. Michael Bearden, who's a musical director. Those guys were great, man. And then she came out, and we had an amazing time during the show. That we went to Brian's show, which was at a club in the MGM, and we stayed there. We hung out till 4:00 in the morning, playing music and having a good time. And some of those photos, that's from the late night show.
But so the video that I saw, it's just you and Lady Gaga up there. And she's like holding the mic while you're playing, and she's grooving while you're playing.
Listen, man, she is a phenomenal talent.
She's an incredible musician.
Oh yeah. No, she's got the goods. She's and she's a great person. She's really, really cool people. Forget all of the fame and all of that other stuff. When it was just us in the room, she was gracious to my daughter.
That's so lovely.
My daughter's birthday was actually it's tomorrow, but we consider that her birthday weekend. My niece, who was there, it was her birthday too. So when we finished, when we were in that back room just hanging out, she sang happy birthday to both of us. You know what I mean? She's a lovely person, man. I love her to death.
Could you see yourselves doing something together? It's being talked about, I bet, isn't it though? I love that.
I'm not saying anything.
All right. All right. You're not saying anything. You got another question, Pete?
Well, shout out from Mark Ribbons in Cleveland. He's a radio host at The Wave. Interviewed you a couple times.
Yeah. What's up, Mark?
Let's see. We got Alvino Bennett watching.
I love you, Alvino.
And Marcus Eaton is watching as well.
Okay. Marcus is the one who did the score for the David Crosby
that
I was telling you about. Yeah. I don't remember my name.
Rob was asking, how was Margaret Miller?
Margaret Miller was my spiritual brother. Margaret Miller was one of those guys that he helped change my life. When I was playing with Art Blakey, he introduced me to Paramahansa Yogananda and self-realization. And he used to say, "Hey man," I would ask him kind of all these questions about what he was doing, because I knew he meditated all the time. And he told me about the book Autobiography of a Yogi. And I got the book and I started to read it, and we were just close. And we were the type of close where it was funny, man. We'd come off the road, and he would go, he said, because, we both were married and had kids, and, he would say, Terence, I love you, but I don't want to see you. Because we've been on the road together for like 10 weeks. He said, I love you, man, but don't call my house. You know what I mean? Because we both were like recluses. We like staying at home. And he was also the type of dude, when I started, when our careers went in different directions, he was the type of dude, I probably wouldn't have seen him for maybe a year or two. But once I saw him, it's like we picked up right where we left off, And when he passed away, man, it really took a chunk out of my life. Just knowing that he was on a planet someplace was like a comfort, because he was that guy that never had a bad word about anybody. He was a very special person, and he was a great musician, at the same time. And he was my big brother, man, and I miss him all the time. There's a website devoted to him, and sometimes when I see people post things, man, it just brings back so many memories about Groot. And he was from Greenwood, Mississippi, little country boy, just like me, being from New Orleans, being from Louisiana. But he had big aspirations, and he accomplished a lot of things being a great musician.
Do you have a spiritual practice?
Yeah, I'm a Buddhist. I became a Buddhist after I was on tour with Herbie. I chant. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm I am. I'm in awe. I'm in awe. I'm really. You do important things. You do a lot of incredible work with important things, and that's very inspiring.
Well, thank you.
And your work ethic is extraordinary, and your output is ridiculous. 2 movies going on now, and you got your band, and you've got all this stuff going on, and what gives you? Is there something that gives you like the most joy, like in the moment when you're doing it?
Oh, when I'm teaching and the light bulb goes off. When you see that in your students, it's that moment. It's like that. Oh, wow, I can do that. I love that moment, because it's like that's what happened to me. It's like those guys. I didn't tell you this earlier, but see, I had great music teachers. I started studying piano when I was 5 years old. My piano teacher was named Martha Francis. She lived we lived in a double. She lived in the other side behind us, so I could never miss a lesson. My next piano teacher, her name was Louise Winchester. From the time that I was 12 years old, she used to sit me down and teach me theory and make me do ear training classes, ear training lessons with her. And then sometimes she would have like 3 or 4 of us together, and we would have ear training tests when I was 12 years old.
Wow. And
then I ran into Roger when I was 15 and 16, and things kind of progressed from there. So teaching and education is like a big thing for me, because I know what it's done for me in my life,
Do you mentor?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I try to. I mean, there are people that I'm always trying to inspire and I talk to. And there's some grown-ups that I keep in touch with, online and through my phone, and we're always talking about things, because I believe it's important, because there's nothing to hoard.
There's enough for everybody. It's an abundant universe.
It's a very abundant universe, and the thing is, the more you give, the more you learn. It's one of the things that I love about teaching. Man, I can teach these kids, the techniques that I use to create music. And it always blows me away how they come up with something totally different than what, and it proves the point about what we were just talking about. There's room for everybody out here, so there's no need to covet things or have an ego about things or think that you need to shield yourself away from things to protect your whatever your position is. It's all bullshit. It's BS,
Have you ever been able to put take a student and put them in something, giving them...
Oh, are you kidding? I mean, half of my band, Yeah, I mean,
That's fabulous.
I had one student that was funny. He was a bass player, Tabari Lake. He's out there. He lives out here now. Great bass player. But he was in class, and I noticed every time He showed up in class, had his work done. He was always like on time, boom, 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 boom. And as I was trying to tell my students this, I said, you don't understand you're being evaluated when you don't even think you're being evaluated.
Oh, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, because this guy, he showed up, he'd always have his stuff done. So I said, you know what, I could rely on him. So when my bass player couldn't make this gig with me in Poland, with one of the greatest orchestras in Poland, I asked Tabari to do it.
Wow.
Right? And he came over. We had Dee Dee Bridgewater. We had Nona Hendrix. We had some other singers and this huge orchestra. And Tabari was the bass player. Yeah,
he was a kid. He was a student. He was a kid.
Wide-eyed kid. But he came there and he hung, and he was very, very much up to the task. To the point where Dee Dee hired him in her band. Yeah, so I'm all.
So talk about that for a second, Terence. What for young aspiring musicians, composers? What is it? What is the work ethic that is going to get them the gig?
It's simple. Don't be the headache. Don't be the headache. Don't be the guy people got to look for. Don't be the guy that doesn't know the music. Don't be the guy that's not prepared. Don't be the guy that everybody's got to wait on. It's just that simple. You know, if you come there prepared, know what you're doing, and you're on time, that's like 90% of the gig.
Have you dealt with prima donnas on?
No, because I don't hire prima donnas.
But I mean, have you been in a position where you've had to wait on people? Good.
No. No, because I don't. That's for me. That's not about music. That's an ego thing or an insecurity thing. It's a struggle for somebody to try to prop themselves up and make themselves feel good about themselves by having other people wait on them. And to me, that has nothing to do with what my beliefs are in terms of spirituality and who we are on the planet. Who we are in the universe.
I took my son to see them. They were filming A Star Is Born, and Lady Gaga was going to be there with Bradley Cooper. And so I took my son, and we were at the Greek, and it was the torturous day from hell. And it was like Bradley had just started directing, and he spent the whole day going like this. I mean, it was like hours of like him going like this, and then Lady Gaga came out and sang like 3 notes, and it was like crazy. But talk about wow. I was segueing into something. Oh, favorite venue. Do you have a favorite venue that you love to play?
No, I love playing New Orleans Jazz Fest just because it's my hometown, and whenever I play there, it feels like a homecoming because there are people that come from all over the world who come to the festival itself, you know, and there are regulars that come, and when you go out on that stage, there's 4,000 people out there, and you look out in the audience, you go, "Hey, what's up?" Hey. You know, that's always cool.
That's sweet. What's the biggest thing you've ever?
Man, when I was playing with Blakey, we played a baseball stadium in Japan. It had 30,000 people out there listening to jazz. Wow. I couldn't believe it. I was, because when they took us to the baseball stadium, I'm like, "Well, why are we here?" You know, and we go out on the stage, and it's like 30,000 people out there. And then I played another concert at the Budokan, again in Japan. There was 10,000 people. Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
It is. And look, this other night with Lady Gaga, it was 5,000 people in Las Vegas. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and I guess for jazz, that's a big deal.
Oh, found out that show was more successful than her pop show.
Really?
Yeah, it did really well.
And she does that regularly?
She's doing it. She just finished this first residency, but she's going to be back there, I think, again in May. Yeah. That's
pretty fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, Terence. I chased you down. I don't know if you were.
I'm sorry.
We had another date for this, but when I saw BlacKkKlansman the first time, I like ran up to you at the thing, and I was like, "Okay, please, I'm friends with Snuffy Walden. Please do this." And you and thank you for seeing it through. I'm so grateful. I know how busy you are.
No, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
It was a treat. And Pete, George, thank you. Tell us where you're going to be next week, Pete.
Grand Hotel Las Vegas, 5 nights.
All right.
Grand Hotel Las Vegas.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week without Pete, but I will be here with, I won't be in Terence's house, but I will be at Connie Stevens' house with Lainey Kazan having, talk about jazz. She's a great singer. Yeah. Lainey has a great voice. She's amazing. Yeah. So we'll see you next week, and thanks so much, Pete, and thank you, Terence.
Thank you.
See you then.
All right.